Hello, welcome to Beyond the Cards, a monthly Redbridge podcast covering the latest in payments news with deep dives into topics we find the most interesting. Definitely a good time because we're a good time. As always, please like, share, and subscribe. We put out new episodes on the second Tuesday of each month, but you should turn on those notifications so that you never miss an episode from us. So we made it, episode 2. We're not canceled. I love that journey for us. I think the audio is slightly better. And we have a new host joining us. So Team USA is now 3 people to Team EU, only 2. Welcome, Chelsea.
Thanks, Dan. It's great to be here.
So, as you know, Team US is now Dan, Jasmine, Chelsea, to Team EU, Gavin, Shira.
Woohoo!
Ooh.
Hello.
So we're going to try to be a little bit more disciplined today and actually, I don't know, not do what we all do best, which is like completely talk about what are supposed to be our hot take for the majority of the episode and then actually not get into a real topic. So I'm going to be trying to or not talk at all. I'm going to try to be good and keep us time to like 5 to 7 minutes on these guys. Probably more like 5-ish. But so let's start in. Are we ready? Are we ready to discuss?
Yes, let's go.
Let's go for it.
All right. So Chelsea, take us in. Talk to us about what's going on with the Visa Mastercard antitrust settlement case.
Okay, so you may be seeing some things in your mail. Most recently, beginning in December, the settlement decided to finalize the claim process, and claim forms have been being sent out. So what we have pulled up here is the actual settlement website. I think the first thing to be careful of is you're going to be getting a lot of spam mail, and these look similar to spam mail. So you want to be checking what you're receiving. But back to the actual settlement, the most recent change is the settlement claim forms that are being mailed out. They have specific information on them for you to begin submitting your claim. This is something we were kind of wondering what was going to transpire and how the process would work. And we've now talked with a number of clients about the forms they've received and kind of what data they are being provided with and what data they need to submit. So the claim form will have 2 kind of key components on it. It has your specific claimant ID and then a control number. Now, probably many people are thinking, well, this has been mailed to a mailroom. Most likely it's already been trashed. It's a 2-page, very basic document. But if you don't have it, as you can see here on the right-hand side, you can easily log in with your tax ID and begin the process that way as well. One thing that we have seen on the claimant form is the number, your transactions, your volume, and your interchange estimates are already provided. I think the big question there is what we're hearing from people is this accurate? As you know, the time period is pretty lengthy. It's from 2004 to 2019 are the years that they're basing those numbers on. So we are working with some clients to kind of review that, but that's going to be left up to the merchants themselves if they're comfortable, I guess, using that number.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess, well, if people aren't aware of what this whole process is, and this has been going on, I think, like longer than Chelsea and I have had our careers, which is a long time. But a case was brought against Visa and Mastercard essentially alleging that they were colluding to increase interchange rates in conjunction with each other to keep prices high. And so this lawsuit was filed, and it's been going on for a very, very long time. Especially just even this settlement amount, I feel like has gone back and forth several times, and it seems now we're finally to a place where it's actually going to happen. And I mean, for years we've been seeing these different law firms, other firms popping up saying that, work with them because they'll help you file a claim and maximize your benefit. There actually had to be like a whole court-ordered website that was created because so many people were trying to spoof the website and traffic in people who, are just trying to get some money back, and leading them kind of down a wrong path. So what I really like about this claims process is it really shows, one, it's super duper easy. You do not need assistance.
Do not need the third party companies.
Yeah, to file your claim. We actually walked through it the other day with a merchant, and they just pulled out their cell phone and were like, this is pretty easy. And we're like, good. We're glad.
Yeah, there's a QR code on the form that you receive. But I think there are a number of probably dupes that, I wouldn't say dupes per se, but yeah, they're being contacted by a number of other third parties. I think we're probably going to see that ramp up now through May as well, just because that's the time period that it's available.
May 31st, last day to file your claim. I think the other thing that we saw when we were kind of walking through this the other day was, you may have, because it involves taxpayer IDs in 2004 to, the time frame, you may have changed taxpayer IDs, or you might have claims, or you might have, your business might have evolved and you're no longer using some of those taxpayer IDs. So the kind of interesting thing is you can get in with one piece of information, or just one or two pieces of information, and then you can build out your account once you're in there. So if you have 20 taxpayer IDs, you can basically add all of those in and aggregate them under one account. So you're probably going to get one of these forms per taxpayer ID that you have, or they will go somewhere. But you can aggregate them all once you're there. So that, I think they made that pretty helpful. I wonder if they had a millennial make that for them.
I think the other thing to mention is, what are your options? We may have, there are some merchants who opted out. So the opt-out time frame ended in 2019. So you had that up until 2019, actually July 23rd, 2019. If you were choosing to not participate in the class action, that's when you had to opt out. Otherwise, by not opting out, essentially, you were, put into the group lawsuit against Visa, Mastercard, and the other banks for these, specific claims against, the inability, the limiting of merchants to steer their clients toward other payment options. So you're in this unless you've opted out. Now, you don't have to file a claim by any means, but you also can't go, sue Visa and Mastercard next year for these same specific reasons. So I guess kind of way to look at it is, well, you're already in, it's pretty simple in terms of,
you might as well look at your money.
Yeah, you might as well see. Now, what is going to be a total fund? There are some pieces that, of course, we have to see I'm sure the courts want to know how many people are actually going to file or how many merchants. But there is some things that aren't, completely finalized. However, the total dollar amount is at that 5.5 billion.
Yeah, but we don't know if it's going to be like 500,000 people submit claims, or is it going to be 2 million people who submit claims? So, I think that's going to be the interesting piece of, and I feel like that's why a lot of larger, well-known merchants opted out, because they were like, well, I don't want to be in this class action where I'm not going to get back what I'm owed to get back. So I'm going to opt out. But I'm also, a 25, $30 billion a year company. I can afford to do this by myself. So interesting stuff. Yeah.
Interesting.
Very interesting. So look at me being good at keeping time. Let's move on to our next topic, which is going to be about real-time payments and who's winning the race in real-time payments. We found this on the American Institute for Economic Research, written by one Nikola Kashanovsky. And I mean, I find this interesting because I feel like I just got myself into a LinkedIn conversation about this. LinkedIn, of all places to be starting serious dialogue on the effects of real-time payments and their interplay with cross-border payments. But I mean, I just think I find this really interesting because, FedNow came out over the summer. I haven't seen anything related to it. Like, I don't see it in my daily life. Maybe I have access to it, maybe I don't. But really what this article is kind of talking about is there's kind of two competing systems. There's the clearinghouse, which most people might know is responsible for ACH and their real-time payments, which has been out a little bit longer. But now there's FedNow. And essentially, like, there's dual systems competing for relevance when it comes to real-time payments. And I think the interesting thing is obviously FedNow is behind in participating institutions. But I think what this article and this author points out that's really interesting is that there's a lot of overlap between the two. And there's roughly 100 institutions that participate in both. So obviously they anticipate that there are going to be both options existing. But I look at some of these numbers, the clearinghouse saying RTP is doing 64 million transactions worth $34 billion in, Q3 2023. And I'm like, where is all of that coming from? Is that all from Zelle? Do we all think it's from Zelle? Is that what it is?
Zelle?
It has to be, because, it's not like you can walk into a store and be like, I'm going to pay you via ACH RTP. Like, and I think it's probably more on like a corporate or even like a bank side. And when I was getting into this LinkedIn discussion, the discussion was about like, are Visa and Mastercard relevant in the world of cross-border payments, and the speed and reliability of their network? And someone in there put, with the global popularity of FedNow, and I was like, I'm sorry, can something be globally popular if it came out in July 2023? So it's not been out a long time. And like, there's not that many participating institutions. Can we say it's globally popular? I don't know. Interesting to me in the fact that I don't think any of these systems are really going to be relevant for the merchant ecosystem beyond maybe how fast your acquirer pays you, or maybe how fast some of your money moves. But I don't think until one, there's some clear expectations on like what are the fees for these services, because it kind of seems like they're still competing from a fee perspective. I think until this is in the hands of consumers and they're not just making account to account payments, like I gotta pay Jasmine and Chelsea, so I'm just gonna like hop on here and pay them. I don't think until you're like actually utilizing these in your daily life as an actual payment method. I guess that just not really. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just about to ask, like, do we really see this coming over really into the merchant world? I mean, yes, nowadays, now I see the update where when you go into Zelle, again, when you're adding somebody new, it asks the question, is this a business? Are you paying for a product, or is this just, I guess, a friendly transfer like myself to you, Dan? But I honestly don't see this really coming for as a consumer as I go into an establishment of a store that's now on the corporate level. I don't see that going in the near future, or I guess in the next year or two, being an actual source of payment method in the real world, going to stores or anything like that. I just don't see that.
Yeah, I don't see it either. And I have my ear to the ground. Like, is anybody doing this? Like, I know that there's more and more pay by bank options being created and being offered, but it's like, it's not clear what rails those methods are using. And I honestly think people deserve a right to know, like, okay, is this leveraging FedNow? Is this leveraging the RTP network? Not to be confused with Europe's use of RTP. But I do think it has to get in the hands of consumers, and how they're going to adapt utilizing these into a, business to consumer aspect that's not like from a small services aspect of like, yeah, if I go and get my hair cut, I can pay the person who cuts my hair through like Zelle or something like that. But again, it's not like I'm walking into a Target and being like, haha, I can pay via FedNow. How cool. Like, let me just like scan my phone. I just don't see the discussions or the discourse on where this is coming out. And I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see that either. And what would be the rates that the businesses will have to consult to take this payment method? I just see it more relevant as a small business owner. And that's why I see it being more used now in the more real-time payment world, like a small business entrepreneur aspect. I just see that more being utilized there than, like you said, at a Target or somewhere. Because you have to get behind, where are these fees? What are the merchants what is it going to take for me to take this payment method?
Yeah, because that's the biggest thing when you pay by bank. Like, what's the risk that you're taking, right? How fast are you going to know whether that person has money, whether the transaction is successful? What are their recourse options? Are there like things like chargeback guarantees or anything built into that, so that way consumers can feel protected? Or are we just boasting a lot of numbers from account to account transfers, which, yes, money is moving. I'm not claiming that money is not moving. But I just don't think it's the same as, the merchant ecosystem. But let's move along and talk about something European related. And let's talk about Apple. Because Apple seems to get itself... Yeah, Apple seems to be getting themselves in the news quite a bit lately, especially when it comes to things payments related. probably something I don't think that they enjoy. Um, but we have an article here from Reuters, which is really seeming as Apple's way to kind of tiptoe out of an EU antitrust case, specifically related to their tap and go tech. This is brought to us by Fuyun Chi from Reuters again. And I mean, Gabshire, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts about Apple opening up their NFC technology to third parties to use?
First of all, it was time. Go ahead, Gab.
No, we're going to say it was time for Apple, but at the same time, I think it came pretty fast because this new technology to accept tap and go payments via iPhones or iPads is pretty recent in Europe. I think it came out first in the US, but now in Europe, it's been a few months since it's really started to be proposed by different international and local providers. So pretty fast, and at the same time, it was time for Apple to have this sort of case because, well, it's well known that it's part of their business model to looking everything they do. So very interesting because we were seeing as well other sort of terminals compatible with Android, like PAX, the Chinese type of terminal. So it's very interesting that there seems to be at least a fair competition between both and any other brand that came in as well on this area. So we may be seeing Apple proposing apps on their App Store for merchants to accept payments via their iPhones. So this is very interesting and also opening completely new area, which is the digitalization of payments at the POS, at the point of sale, which is being much more mainstream in e-commerce with the orchestration and many different type of players. So yeah, interesting to see what this will open as options for the market and at the end as a service for merchants.
Yeah, I mean
All right, go ahead.
I mean, it seems like it's really the antitrust regulators from the European Commission, which seem to be very tough people. They do not seem to back down and seems to be one of the few regulators who actually makes a lot of change in the world. USB-C on iPhones, anybody? I mean, because I kind of look at it from like two situations. I think, yes, I think you're spot on with the, other people should be able to develop on iOS and take advantage of that technology for creating more options within the payments terminal space. But then it's kind of like the whole Apple Pay, Apple Wallet situation. And I'm like, yes, like that should be opened up. People should be able to use that. But I also can see like from an Apple perspective of like, even if we allowed somebody to create a third party wallet app on iOS, would you choose to use it? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's something that shows us for the moment as of today that it's quite something that it's quite good that Apple technology is used for payment terminals. But what will be the future? I mean, isn't it risky because it's not the DNA of a brand like Apple to be open in comparison to Android. So let's see what will happen in the future. So
yeah, I mean, I think both Apple and Android/Google get a lot of heat for their marketplaces, obviously, of like the commissions that they take. And both have kind of been criticized for their walled gardens and not allowing people to advertise or give options to make payments outside of their ecosystems as well. Which this is not that, obviously. This is like very much related to tap and go NFC. But, I wonder who, and I've been looking to try to find, like, who are these companies who are saying that they're being harmed by this, and like, what are they trying to build? I guess I'm always missing kind of that piece of the puzzle. Maybe I'm just not looking hard enough. Dear listener, if you are one of those companies who wants to build that out and you can't, please leave us a comment. I'd like to know. I'd like to engage with you. But I guess that's my kind of like ultimate question. And I guess maybe we see this, right, on Android phones, right, between like things like Samsung Pay and Google Pay, right? They're, I could call them sisters. They coexist, right? But there's no kind of alternative for Apple. It's Apple Pay or nothing, right? You know, what would those different payment solutions look like? So I guess that's always kind of the case with these, is like, who is being harmed by this? Because obviously, you know, someone has to be harmed for it to be considered antitrust, right? Is that the way antitrust works? I don't know. Chelsea, you're better in the legal space than I am.
I don't know so much about that specific question, but I was thinking the same thing as you mentioned. Who's going to actually, you know, who's the actual use case? Because personally, I'd probably just stick with Apple Pay, but maybe the creators of the other ones would have more features, more bells and whistles. Guess we just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the like chicken and egg question, right? That regulators have to really like dive through, which is essentially like, yeah, but no one is asking for this. And it's like, well, are we not asking for it because we don't know what's capable, because innovation has always is being stifled? So we just don't know what could be there. So I guess that's really the challenge for the EU regulators. But if there's one thing about EU regulators, if anyone knows about EU regulators, is they tend to side with consumers more than they side with companies.
This may be way off the rails, but would there be something like, you know, how Walmart doesn't want anything to do with Apple Pay? They have their own Walmart Pay. They don't have the Google Pay or even Samsung Pay. They have their own, and they don't look forward to even implementing Apple Pay at all. It's either Walmart Pay or that's it.
I think that there has something to do, and this is just me like speculating to some extent. I think because those of us who like look at merchant fees beyond the scope of these kind of flashy names, right? Like, we know that they just show up as like regular interchange rates. Like, spoiler alert, they're just regular interchange for whatever card is loaded into that wallet. I sometimes think it has more to do with payment steering than anything else, and utilizing debit, and they may find it more challenging to, or like less successful with routing those transactions. That's just my 2 cents. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but often I feel like when like a Google Pay or an Apple Pay aren't accepted, in my like the back of my head, my little spidey sense goes off, and I'm like, is this a routing decision? Are you just trying to subtly encourage me to use a different payment form because you think I have a high yield credit card in here? I don't know. But we can talk about oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, one way that's common. I think you made a right point, and I think also this case could come from the fact that, you know, as of today, there are first European manufacturers that have been working on creating new terminals, like Worldline, for instance. It's not the only one, but it's one of the main examples at a European level. And now with iPhone, that could be really, you know, an antitrust case, because iPhone could become the only way for merchants to accept payments for a certain type of merchants, and rather the smaller one, I would say. So maybe keeping separate the fact of building the payment terminals and then accepting transactions, acquiring transactions is maybe the objective behind. And of course, there should be much more of, keeping, routing capabilities and these sort of things. I think it's also part of that. But at the end, keeping the market open for, companies keep building terminals and doing acquiring in a relatively open way. Or, what Apple would be like, you use your iPhone, you accept through Apple, Apple takes commission from everywhere, and they could increase fees as much as they can once they have the good market share. Yes.
And so
Very true.
also in terms of technology by itself, it can be very interesting in this context to see what Apple is able to provide. Maybe we don't. It's quite difficult to plan or to get what will happen and how the ecosystem will evolve. But having Android terminals, for example, and having also Apple terminals made can, enrich also the landscape with additional and more innovative technology. And maybe we are also we are not yet prepared, and we cannot be prepared of what Apple is able to do. And remember that Apple is one of these brands who was able to, in a way, to create the need regarding any customer. So what about the payment? They may have their place, and let's see what they are able to propose.
Intriguing. Continuing on the concepts of regulation, we have another story from Payments Dive and Lynn Merrick on Buy Now, Pay Later. We keep coming back to this but it looks like a few senators are pushing or trying to push the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is, the body in the U.S. that's in charge of ensuring that companies are not taking advantage of consumers. They've asked them to keep an eye on Buy Now, Pay Later, and I think, let's see, it's Sherrod Brown, Raphael Warnock, and John Fetterman. So looking at urging the CFPB to really be taking a look at this, because I think it's very easy to get into bad spending habit when you're given these options all the time, everywhere. And maybe they don't need to be everywhere. But there is increasing evidence that people are getting into spending problems with these Buy Now, Pay Later options. And, there are no protections right now. There's, nothing blocking people with potentially risky debt profiles or, issues with their credit history from taking advantage of these, because these really do kind of skirt a lot of laws aimed at protecting those consumers from themselves because of the forward payment nature. Doesn't seem like there's a huge push to significantly lock this down or to regulate it further, but it does seem like there's growing interest in, definitely seems like if we're starting to poke the CFPB bear, that maybe in a year or two, if not longer, we might see some general restrictions coming into the Buy Now, Pay Later space, at least in the US.
I think they've really been able to fly under the radar, and really the statistics on the growth of Buy Now, Pay Later are just crazy. I came across some information. I know we were talking about the surge around the holidays, but the statistics from really 2019 to now, in terms of growth, are very, very, in 2019, US buy now, pay later lending totaled about $3 billion, and we're up 13 times to 2020 was $39 billion. And they're projecting in 2024, it's going to hit about $114 billion. And just knowing that this has very, very limited in terms of regulations and oversight is kind of crazy, right? I mean, also given who the users are of this, it's like you said, it's easy to think, oh, well, it's $30, over so many months. But if you get enough $30 over so many months and you're a consumer, a younger, whatever generation, that's going to add up. And you could get in a little bit of hot water, for yourself. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And we shall be very careful about what it can become, because as you mentioned, Chelsea, it has grown a lot from 2019, and the COVID period, also with the every economic downturn is something very which enable buy now pay later to thrive also. I mean, all the perfect conditions are covered to maintain this. And the thing is that of course, we have a lot of buy now pay later providers, for instance. We have more and more, and that's what we noticed also. And we have also the merchants on one side, on the other side, that which want and which, in a way, are looking for proposing this type of new payment methods to their customer, because as the payment, in the case every payment made by with buy now pay later is made fully to the merchant, so the merchant fully receives the payment, the payout, and it's as though the final customer had to pay for the different installments to the buy now pay later providers. So there are a lot of insurance, but the thing is that if the merchant is not able, if the merchant is not able to propose and to control, to assess his final customer with the risk of being in debt, the merchant at the end will be at loss. And this is something that I have the feeling that is not very well understood yet on the merchant side, and that maybe the customer will rather be protected if the merchant helps, saying that he's at risk. If the merchant realizes that he's the first to be at risk.
Well, sometimes it seems like it's kind of like buying things on credit with credit, right? Like I'm pretty sure you can load a credit card into these buy now, pay later providers. You're not like forced to only use a debit card, or you're not forced to only use like a pay by bank option with them. And I think that's where that risk starts to escalate of, if you're buying things on credit with credit, like who's eventually going to get paid? And I mean, I think really probably what it'll take for any like monumental shift is, someone big to actually like go out of business and be like, they had spiraling default of users of not paying. But I think right now a lot of that just gets covered up. And maybe that's, one of the regulations that we would see come out, which is, if you were using a buy now, pay later service, you can only put your debit card in it, or it has to be a pay by bank situation. So that way you're not fueling your credit purchases via credit, which is usually a thing that you're not allowed to do, but I think you're kind of allowed to do it in this situation. All right.
I think it's crazy the spaces that it's going into. In my mind, when I think of buy now, pay later, I think of just like shopping, retail, maybe you're buying shoes.
Buying a pair of shoes.
Yeah, you can use it for restaurants. To me, seems just crazy.
Literally the burning thing now. You can use it for a flight. You can use it for everything, basically everything.
Yeah.
At this moment. And I think sometimes I think it's a good and a bad thing because they have to think you can't just protect the consumers. You also have to protect the actual companies because you do have those instances where the consumer runs off or actually the interest rate is too expensive for the consumer as well. So I think it's on both sides that it's a risky little ordeal in my mind.
I think it's going to take one to like actually fail. Any major things to happen. So let's talk about our main story, which I don't know. You all know that I live way too much of my life online. And so I sent you like a 35-minute video of someone shopping via social media marketplaces for like a very specific item. And I mean, what stuck out to me is in that video, the creator was putting a lot of onus on the social media platform to restrict potential fraudsters from jumping on and, trying to make a quick buck. And that kind of got my payment brain thinking, which is it really the responsibility of the platform to reduce fraud? Or is it the responsibility of the acquirers or the PayFacs who are enabling that type of actor to participate? Is it their responsibility? And I mean, I think with TikTok, far becoming the fastest, if not largest at this point, social media platform, TikTok Shop is obviously a huge portion of TikTok. I think you have to like go through TikTok Shop to get to your For You page. I'm not a TikTok user, so look at me talking about something I don't even use. I am a heavy Instagram user, but it gets so confusing as a consumer navigating these social media marketplaces. What's real and what's not real, like with drop shippers, fraudulent storefronts, legitimate merchants, all trying to be in these spaces. I think it raises really interesting questions of whose responsibility is it? I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think it's like the responsibility of and not to pick on anybody here, this is not shame, but, somebody like a Shopify, right? Is it Shopify's responsibility to faster detect potential fraudulent actors on these platforms, when their whole thing is could speed to opening up your e-commerce storefront, right? They're trying to speed that process up. And that's been kind of and they're not the only ones who do this, but, that increase in speed to getting your e-commerce storefront as, opposed to say like a legacy provider who's going to subject you to maybe a lengthier underwriting process. Is that good in these situations? Because, listen, I'm dumb. I make a lot of stupid decisions in my life. Like, have I bought something off of an Instagram ad? 100%. And did I end up finding out that what I thought was a legitimate storefront was just a drop shipper whose actual like processing address was in Belgium and then shipped product to me from China, directly from China? 100%. Thankfully, I did not get scammed. But I think the fun and interesting thing about that video is like I think she bought like 24 different things that all used the same advertisement, had the same item in it, and a couple of the like shops that she went to try to go back like a month or two later were gone, like disappeared,
Yeah.
and she never got her money back.
Yeah,
The
or
thing
you
is,
send the product back and they never receive it. Go ahead, Shira.
Yeah.
I think that the responsibility is shared. You don't have a magic answer to such a difficult question. As the social media are rising, you mentioned TikTok, for instance, and there is the ability to sell products, and you can find either legitimate but also illegitimate, and it's sometimes difficult. You have Amazon, which is banning, which sometimes, for example, bans some legitimate also, because when they try to control, of course, you want to mitigate the fraud, etc. But at the same time, by mitigating the fraud, it's true that you obviously will have, and you will have, false positive, So you would be able to ban some legitimate merchants from your platform, from your marketplace. And this is something that happens, and these little merchants go to other kind of platforms which are able to accept them, in a way.
Not little
Well,
merchants.
not all of merchants, of course, but they will be able to, for example, somebody who has been the subject of a ban from Amazon can easily go to sell its product on TikTok, but he is confronted to the situation where he is aside an illegitimate or a scammer,
Yeah.
So it's quite difficult, and it's up to the customer also to check that everything is okay with this merchant. The thing is that the social media have the ability very easily to create the need to have something right now. So it's quite difficult.
Yeah. And Shira's referencing an article, and we'll link it from Camilla Hodgson from the Financial Times on Amazon Marketplace seller crackdown, right? In which legitimate sellers are having their accounts closed and they can't get them back up because, it's a big machine, right? Like, it's a big machine, and they're not large enough to where they can garner, a personal support from, the marketplace. Basically, some probably like negative points hit up against some sort of fraud searching algorithm, and then they get shut down and everything gets locked down, and they can't get their money out, they can't make sales, but they are legitimate. And so I think you have kind of two sides there, right? Like, it's good that Amazon is taking steps to remove fraudulent sellers on their marketplace, but there's obviously some collateral damage that happens when you do that. And if you don't have a good process for addressing the legitimate sellers who get shut down, obviously you then run the risk of those sellers never returning to your marketplace. They go somewhere else, take their risk somewhere else. So I think you kind of have both sides here, and I think that's the interesting part of, like, does someone like Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or, Etsy, Amazon, what is their responsibility in ensuring that they're legitimate sellers? Now, I think, like someone like an Etsy or an Amazon are a slightly different buildup than I would say a TikTok or an Instagram, right? Because I think on some of those other social media platforms, you can use a different, you don't have to maybe use their setup, which I think, on like Amazon or Etsy, you have to use their payment services, which means that they are taking a stake in those sellers. Whereas I don't think TikTok does. I think it's like you just link your shop in.
Yeah.
In fact, too, if you try to get something back from Amazon, refund-wise, you probably have a much better chance in terms of the consumer side, right? I mean, it's not perfect by any means. I actually just had my account hacked on Amazon. So I was spending lots of time Googling the Amazon phone number, which it's very hard to get a hold of someone. Anyways.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah.
You were saying something.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like the social media, but I think they need to. I think the responsibility does lie on them as well, because it's so easy I can sit up here and send Dan a little link and ask him to sell my product, right? Or I can sit up here and advertise a product to somebody else, put a link down, and that link is a faulty link, and I can pay for something, either never get it, or I get it and it's totally opposite of what I saw on the TikTok video. So in that, I literally think it is up to TikTok and social media that they need to get a more tight system and process to vetting these people that are actually advertising false products or anything, because there is a lot of scammers on these social medias these days.
Yeah, and even if they eventually sell you something, right? Like, even if it's not what you ordered, right? They still took your money, right? So, I think that's the scary part. And I think in general, right, these platforms have some legal bandwidth, right? Like they have content moderation, of course, but they're not necessarily responsible for what happens on their platforms. And I forget like the specific law that comes in here in the US that protects these platforms. I could see an argument being made that says like, we're not responsible for this. But I think from a consumer perspective, right, consumers don't know, when you have a merchant relationship, it's who's ever providing those merchant services responsibility to limit fraud. And so, to me, I think TikTok has, or like any social media, please don't come after me, TikTok, please. I think whatever social media platform has a responsibility to like moderate content use, and perhaps they can beef up their algorithms to say, hey, this looks like an ad that's being used inappropriately. This isn't you. But I do think ultimately when it comes to reducing fraud from a payments perspective, it does come down to who's ever providing those services. And I think there has to be a step in that underwriting process, whatever it may be, to say like, where are you intending to like use this? Are you using your own domain? Are you only selling through a social media marketplace? Because in that video, that creator, some of those shops that they were going to didn't even have their own website. And I'm like, that should be red flag number one. That
Yes.
if they don't have their own website, maybe don't buy it.
Let's just say I already been a victim. I bought a dupe perfume that I thought was, and I got it, and it was not to what I bought, okay? And I literally thought, I'm like, it's TikTok's fault. You're the marketplace. But I think at the end of the day, TikTok can kind of be like a posh market or whatever, a posh where I feel like I'm selling my own item, and it's not really up to posh to give me my stuff back. It's up to, whoever you sold it from. It's like,
Yeah, the seller.
yeah, it's your fault. You should have vetted it a little more. TikTok, we have nothing to do with it. But I think they're looking at it like that too. But I'm like, but you're supposed to be a marketplace. Why don't you vet everyone that's trying to sell on your platform? Because technically you're turning into a marketplace.
Yeah, I guess that's a really good question of like, do they even consider themselves a marketplace? I'm like, you have all of the trappings of a marketplace.
Yeah.
Why do you think that you don't have to have the same level of
Yeah.
vetting that, some of these other marketplaces do? And, sad again when collateral damage happens. But I think you also need to I think it's fair to criticize that the process for correcting collateral damage is not great. But you should also maybe be glad that those types of systems exist, because probably the amount of collateral damage that happens is smaller to the extent of actual non-legitimate sellers, illegitimate, probably a better word in that case, are being banned or being kicked out, because that's ultimately going to help you once you get your account back. Is if you don't have 20 other fake drop shippers pretending to sell a product next to you, that's ultimately better for you.
Yeah, and the positive thing also for small merchant is that and very genuine small merchant is that this visibility, even if they're using Amazon services to buy and to sell their products, maybe that social media like Instagram or TikTok would be better for them just for the visibility until they are able to sell some products and to have sufficient funds, so for example, to get their own website or something like that, so that they can be more legitimate,
Yeah, I mean, I think the big takeaway here is never buy anything from somebody who doesn't have their own website.
Yeah.
Like if you can only buy the product through that platform, maybe raise your eyebrow at it and think that's suspicious. That doesn't seem a little bit right. And also, I would think maybe, also take a second guess at who's hosting that e-commerce checkout, right? I think that's asking a lot for consumers to protect themselves. But I think the ultimate thing here is you gotta protect yourself. Also, don't shop with a debit card at any of these places so that you have full chargeback rights. Maybe if you're feeling really risky, go get yourself a prepaid debit card. It's who's to say, and my overarching concern with this is you just threw your payment information into the void of a fraudulent merchant. What are what are they doing with that?
What are the odds that they're a hacker?
Exactly. You're
Can you go shop it, go see if you can find that same product if on a more legitimate site as well.
Like Amazon or something. But you do have those fraudsters on Amazon too. Amazon is a little more, not lenient, but they're more vetted with their market. But you do still have those scammers on Amazon as well.
So the lesson here, shop direct.
Yeah.
Browse on your marketplaces, find the things that you want, but then maybe do a little research and make sure that, is this real? Is this really what I'm supposed to be getting? I think there's a couple of telltale signs that something is not right. Like if your bank immediately calls you after you try to make a transaction and is like, this looks suspicious because your card got authed in a completely different country from where you are, maybe you aren't in a good situation. How exciting. I love this topic, but I'm sure we could talk about it forever, but I think we've reached our time. Have we reached our time? Yes, we have.
I think so.
All right. Well, great discussion, everybody. Well, everybody, join us next month. We will be some of us will be going to a conference. How exciting. So we will have some updates live from the Magnified Mid-Year Conference taking place here in February. So we will be coming with all the exciting news from there. And until next time, bye.
Bye. Bye. Don't forget to subscribe and to like, and feel free to put a comment.
Yes.